Meanwhile, back in the States,
Susan arrives at her mother's house and tells her they need to leave right away, and her mother responds by babbling semi-coherently about the apocalypse and the end of days. While flipping through channels, her mother finds a news report on the weather conditions at Chichen Itza. Why in God's name would they report on that particular location?
Oh, right, because plot.
Oh, and by the way, that's not Chichen Itza. That's the Pyramid of the Magician, which is at a completely different site. Could they not find video footage of the real Chichen Itza? They found a picture for the box art. Susan's mother remarks that Susan used to dream about that pyramid when she was little and drew pictures of it. That's oddly specific.
I saw a man with a tattoo like that today. I couldn't save him.
Maybe God is trying to show you something.
Via drive-by shooting. Is there some reason why God couldn't have chosen a slightly less violent method of delivering his message?
They get in their car and drive away just as a tornado touches down in the area. Apparently, the response from most of the locals is to run in terror in the streets. I'm sure Californians wouldn't be used to this sort of thing, but are they seriously trying to outrun the tornado? If so, they deserve death. Susan decides to head south of the border because for some reason she can't explain, she feels she has to get to the pyramid at Chichen Itza. Her conversation with her mother basically goes like this. God's trying to tell you something, Susan.
I don't believe in God.
Why not?
Because bad things and death and science and stuff.
Then why are you driving to a Mayan pyramid?
Because plot!
Meanwhile, the three idiot archaeologists are also heading to Chichen Itza when suddenly an earthquake opens a fissure right underneath them. While Frank and Trish run for cover, Ian stays behind to retrieve the crucifix from the car and falls into the fissure. Trish and Frank manage to save the crucifix, but Ian falls to his death. Okay, if I'm understanding this movie correctly, God is causing this apocalypse. But according to the prophecy, God also supposedly wants them to return this golden crucifix to Chichen Itza, for reasons he only knows. So if they're doing God's will, why is he killing them off one by one?
I get the feeling God's going to be a real dick in this movie.
Back in Veracruz, Sarah and Dr. Creepy head to Gino's village while Sarah exposits details about Wakana. They said in the earlier scene she was sick, and it turns out she has been afflicted with the most horrible disease imaginable.
pregnancy.
And if you guessed she's a virgin, step forward to claim your prize. She apparently has to travel to the temple at Chichen Itza because it's her destiny. If you were expecting a more detailed explanation, clearly you forgot what movie we were watching. And if you're wondering how Sarah suddenly knows all these details about Wakana, I don't know either. Maybe Gino told her this stuff in Spanish in that earlier scene, but I'm pretty sure he didn't.
Wakana? Sí, hablas inglés? Little.
Good, because we're too cheap for subtitles. Sarah recognizes Wakana could give birth at any minute, so she and Dr. Creepy decide to take her to the nearest hospital. As they start to head toward Dr. Creepy's car, it starts snowing, even though it's very bright out, which means no clouds and therefore no precipitation. But why should I expect this movie to get even the most basic science right at this point? We briefly check in on Trish and Frank, and we learn that Trish somehow got a huge gash in her side while escaping the car, although we never actually saw that happen. Frank says Trish is losing a lot of blood, even though we can clearly see from this shot the wound isn't bleeding anymore. But if blood loss doesn't kill her, plot convenience certainly will. Sarah and Dr. Creepy have finally found his car, but they're divided on what they should do with Wakana, even though they seemed to be in agreement earlier. Dr. Creepy wants to take her to a hospital, but Sarah wants to take her to the fucking pyramid.
You want to drive across the country to some Mayan temple with a woman who's about to give birth, just because some village boy told you so?
Oh sure, it sounds silly when you put it that way.
Sarah continues to protest, and Dr. Creepy finally relents and agrees to take them to Chichen Itza. They stop at a payphone on the way. Wait, didn't she have a cell? So Sarah can call her dad and tell him where she's heading. Naturally, Lloyd is quite confused by this, aren't we all? But the cell phone signal breaks up before she can explain herself, so Lloyd decides to charter a flight to Mexico so he can join his daughter. During the flight, he and the pilot, who appears to be an old friend of his, have a conversation about God and how he has a plan for all of us.
You know, I get the feeling this just might be a religious movie.
At some point, a freak storm kicks up that nearly takes them out, but they somehow survive by the skin of their teeth. After landing, the pilot points Lloyd toward a nearby car and says the keys are inside and it's ready to go. The good Lord provides, hallelujah! But Lloyd is on his own from here on out, as the pilot is not coming with him.
This is your journey. I was just supposed to get you this far.
Sure enough, after Lloyd gets to the car, he turns around and the pilot is gone. Either he's been raptured, or he's returned to his home on the planet Zartan. Either way, he's out of this movie and therefore in a much better place. And it turns out the pilot isn't the only one who's getting raptured. Susan's car breaks down, so she stops and pops the hood. A second later, her mother is gone. Sure enough, this finally makes a believer out of her, and she gets on her knees and prays to God for guidance.
You know, for a company called Faith Films, there's really not a lot of faith involved in this scene. God just miracled her mother's ass into thin air right out from under her. So she pretty much just got proof of his existence, and faith is no longer necessary.
In fact, if she looks toward the heavens right now, she should see the remnants of the puff of logic.
Please tell me what to do. Just send me a sign.
Any sign at all.
As luck would have it, Lloyd drives by at this moment and stops to see if Susan needs help. How goddamn convenient. Once they realize they're headed to the same place, he offers her a ride. Meanwhile, after lumbering for several hours in the jungle, Frank and Trish finally arrive at another pyramid that we're now pretending is Chichen Itza, even though it looks nothing like the real Chichen Itza, nor the Pyramid of the Magician we saw earlier. Even by Asylum standards, this is sloppy. As soon as they are in sight of not Chichen Itza, Trish finally succumbs to her wounds and dies. And even though she and Frank were separated, it turns out she still had the wedding ring around her neck. This moment might be touching if the rest of the film wasn't so stupid. And speaking of stupid, a freak hailstorm suddenly kicks up, which causes Dr. Creepy to start swerving wildly. Is he seriously trying to dodge the hail in an SUV? Well, it doesn't work because one piece of hail somehow crashes through the windshield and embeds itself in his chest. And then the hailstorm instantly stops.
Shot to the heart, and God's to blame. This movie gives him a bad name.
Sarah and Dr. Creepy decide to pray one last time before he kicks the bucket.
We know you sent your son, Jesus Christ, to die for us. We believe. This is Alex. He didn't believe, but he sees you now.
Yes, I'm sure he does. However, and I apologize if I sound like I'm repeating myself here, but if this great and powerful and allegedly loving God wanted to make a believer out of Dr. Creepy, couldn't he have chosen something a little less chest woundy?
And he dies. How sad. Moving on. No, it's not. You're not fooling anyone. Frank enters the temple and uses the crucifix to open a hidden door that reveals an altar. According to the ancient writing on the wall, a woman is supposed to give birth on the altar, which will bring together the chosen messengers of Christ.
You chose poorly.
A moment later, Sarah and Wakana show up, followed by Lloyd and Susan. And now Susan finally understands her purpose in all this, which is to use her medical training to help Wakana give birth.
Even though Dr. Creepy also could have done that since he supposedly had some medical training, but I guess he wasn't part of this plan since he was a non-believer. But Susan was also a non-believer, at first anyway, so why did God choose her instead? You know what, forget it, we're almost done.
So the Earth stops spinning and the entire world starts burning, crumbling, blowing up, etc., etc. Then everything goes into slow motion for some reason until Wakana finally gives birth to a baby that's not crying. I call bullshit. Then the planet starts spinning again, the sun rises, and the world is saved. Except for the parts that were destroyed.
We've been chosen as messengers of God to spread His word to the non-believers left on Earth. The miracle of life brought us together, reminding us of God's grace and power.
Joke's on you. She just gave birth to the Antichrist. Okay, I made that up, but that would have been an interesting twist.
This isn't the end. It's just the beginning.
No, I assure you, this is the end of the movie, and thank God for that!
Movies produced by the Asylum can often fall in the so bad it's good category. Sure, they're cheaply and hastily put together and rip off much better movies, but that often makes them hilarious and they can still be a lot of fun to watch, in spite of, or sometimes because of their poor quality. Sherlock Holmes is a great example. Abraham Lincoln vs. Zombies is a great example. 2012 Doomsday is not. This is the Asylum at its worst. The acting ranged from mediocre to crap, the special effects ranged from crap to horrible, the 2:40 aspect ratio was pointless, the directing was cringeworthy, and the story was an absolute mess. I'm not really sure who this movie was made for. I don't see it appealing to Christians since it made God look like a first-class sadistic douchebag and made his followers look like complete idiots who couldn't find their own asses if they were on fire. Or perhaps struck by hail. And I don't see this movie converting anyone to Christianity, largely for the same reasons.
Regardless of what you believe, I think we can all agree this movie was a total crock of shit, and Roland Emmerich's 2012 doesn't seem so bad now. Join me next time when we will take a look at another mockbuster, though this one does not come from the Asylum. Until then, I'm the Smeghead, and Hollywood can suck it.
Jesus Christ, why don't you come save my life now? Open my eyes, blind me with your light now. Jesus Christ, why don't you come save my life now? Open my eyes, blind me with your light now. Deaf and blind and dumb and born to follow.
Jesus!